Thairo Estrada does it again. This man has a flair for the dramatic when it comes to ninth inning home runs, and he did it in Chicago. I thought there was very little chance that the Giants were going to win this game after they went behind late, but a three-run homer in the ninth to go ahead by one, that'll do it.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting Locked On Giants for over 5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And coming up on today's show, yes, indeed, we're talking about the Giants dramatically defeating the Chicago Cubs in a game that I thought was over. I thought the Giants were going to win when they took a 1-0 lead, and then they fell behind 2-1, but then they went ahead 3-2 in the seventh. It felt like, okay, this is a game they're destined to win, but some awful umpiring along with a dropped pop-up gave the Cubs a 4-run inning in the bottom of the seventh, and Giants got one back in the eighth with a Patrick Bailey solo homer, but nonetheless, they entered the ninth down by 2 runs, and Michael Conforto made an out to start the inning, and so down by 2, 1 out, nobody on base. I mean, the odds are not great of winning that game. And what we got then was a catcher's interference with Jorge Soler reaching there. It was a 3-2 pitch that he did foul off anyway. So who knows how that at bat would have played out. But he hit the catcher's glove with his on his swing and reached first base there. And then Mike Yastrzemski came up and was patient and drew a walk. Just another example of why, we don't really take, I think walks are underrated, right? It's as good as a single in that situation, down by a couple runs. And then up comes Thairo. And this was, it was a long at bat for Soler. It was a long at bat for Yastrzemski, just kind of working the count. And then there was a mound visit after the walk to Yastrzemski. And Thairo's just laying in the weeds for this first pitch fastball that was down and in, kind of in, I don't know if it's the nitro zone for Thairo, but he can hit the ball up as well, the pitch up as well. But he did it again. I mean, Thairo, I think Roger Munter on Twitter tweeted out that this was the fourth ninth inning home run by Thairo Estrada that's either tied the game or given the Giants the lead, which is like tied for the fourth most in Giants history. Which, we've seen it. He did it in Pittsburgh. I know he did it. There was a walk-off last year at home. Well, obviously at home if it was a walk-off. He's just done this several times, but for this one to be a go-ahead homer down by 2 or more runs, I think is what they were saying on the broadcast after the game. First time since Hector Sanchez did that in 2013. And I actually vividly remember that. I want to say that was like a walk-off splash hit homer for Hector Sanchez. I want to say. I could be kind of confusing it with something else. I might be. Brandon Crawford had a walk-off splash hit homer back then, I think, as well. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that Thairo Estrada, and then the emotion, like him just letting out a roar as he kind of saw the ball go over the fence, and just his run around the bases. This is not a guy who normally shows a lot of emotion on the field. And one of the points that I'm trying to make here is that this team has just, I think you probably give it credit to new manager Bob Melvin, the rest of the staff that Melvin has brought in, and also bringing in some veteran players who have a certain leadership type, like a Matt Chapman, for example, comes to mind. Jorge Soler, perhaps comes to mind, although he's a little. I mean, they're both like quiet, kind of professional types, but this team, it seems they've got leadership. It's like they're not playing for themselves; they're playing for the team. That's what it feels like, and it hasn't felt that way really the last couple of years, or at least one of the ways it's looked to people on the outside, including me. It's looked boring at times, and this team does not look boring. I mean, the fire and the energy and the emotion that you saw on Thairo Estrada for a team that's one game under 500, even with the win. It's not like they're just having this phenomenal season and it's easy to get, happy and emotional. They're fighting. And this home run by Estrada, I mean, it was huge to go instead of 35 and 38, with a loss, which you're 2 outs away from doing there. You're one swing away from losing the game. Double play, game over, you lose 35 and 38. But instead, 3-run homer, you're ahead, and you're going to have to rely on Camilo Doval in the ninth. We did talk yesterday about, is it time for a change at closer? And then I mentioned Ryan Walker, but then I said, well, Walker's pitched in back-to-back days, so it probably would have to be Doval. And sure enough, it was Doval. And we'll get into how he was able to get through that inning and secured the win. But I don't know, just the fight of this team. And man, there was a Sarah Lang's tweet. This is definitely something I need to pull up and recall here. So the Giants have, she says, the Giants have 5 wins when trailing by multiple runs in the 8th inning or later since May 22nd. So we're talking less than a month, like significantly less than a month. 5 wins when trailing by multiple runs in the 8th inning or later since May 22nd. Only one other team has multiple such wins in that span, and that's the Royals with 2. So the last month, I mean, the dramatic, they just had that stretch. It was like 4 games in a row where they were down by 4 runs or more, right? But I don't know if every one of those was in the 8th inning or later. So I don't know. I mean, the fight and the resilience is just something you love to see, and I think something that bodes well for them as there is a lot of time left. It's not like the season is like running out, and well, even if it was, they're in a playoff spot right now, and so there is that. The National League just has quite a bit of parity. You've got some teams at the top, but then you've got this huge scrum in the middle, and then a couple of teams at the bottom. And the Giants are right in the thick of it. The Cubs are in the thick of it, and that's why these games are extra important. Anytime you're playing one of those teams that's in that scrum, and most of the time you're going to be playing one of those teams because it's basically almost all of the National League we're talking like 9 teams within 2 games of each other or so. And right after this, the Giants play the Cardinals, who are the team that's directly ahead of them, but just barely, like a half game ahead of the Giants, something like that. So, 1 full game ahead of the Giants, actually. But yeah, there really are 9 teams within 3 games of each other. I think going into yesterday, it was within 2 games of each other, but that's a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 3 games of each other. And we're talking one of those teams is the number 2 wild card team, and one of them is the 3rd worst team in the league, and that's the Cubs. But they could literally, within a span of 3 days, maybe not with who's playing who, but be in a playoff spot. And so that's just what we're looking at, and that's why I think the Giants, like any of these teams, has a chance to separate themselves simply by going on a run and pulling away from that 500 mark, because there's just a lot of hovering around 500 and mostly a little below 500. There's a lot of like the Giants are the number 3 wild cards team, and they're 1 game below 500. That just speaks. There's only 5 teams in the National League that are over 500, and one of them's just 1 game over 500, and that's the Cardinals, who, like I said, the Giants play next after they're done in Chicago. So coming up in just a minute, more about this game, the other home runs. Heliot Ramos did it again. Outfield assists, the horrible strike zone, perhaps the worst we've seen all season. And like I said, Camilo Doval bouncing back. So we'll get into all of it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Game Time. you know by now, because you've heard me talk about it a lot, that I love going to Giants games on the road. I went to San Diego to start the season, and then Los Angeles after that. I went to Boston when the Giants were there. I went to Denver when the Giants were there. And I've got other games on my mind on the calendar coming up as well. And for me, Game Time is the place to go to buy tickets to whether it's baseball or any other event. And there's two things that are my absolute favorites about Game Time, and one is panoramic views from your seat, especially when I'm going to a venue that I haven't been to before, like I hadn't been to Fenway Park, being able to see what is the view like from that seat, because you're looking at a two-dimensional map some other places and it's like, well, okay, I don't know how high is that, for example. And then also the lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Supply House. Get supplies from the sites that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands to get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right, as promised, we're going to get into the rest of the many dramatic twists and turns of this game. A couple outfield assists, couple more home runs. Heliot Ramos keeping it going. Strike zone was horrible. Camilo Doval, just so much to get into. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow, we're going to be probably waiting until after the day game, because the day game's at like 11 o'clock. And so there'll be a game tonight, and then there'll be a day game tomorrow, and then there will be a podcast after the day game tomorrow. So look out for a double dip, 2 games for the price of one. Well, the price is free on Locked On Giants, but you know what I'm saying. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Reminder, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So, more from this game. We had a couple of outfield assists that were huge, including a runner being thrown out at home plate by Mike Yastrzemski. And obviously, when you win 7-6, a guy getting thrown out at home plate is enormous because it's a one-run game. And so cutting a runner down at home obviously means if you didn't do that, we're still playing, so that was huge at the time. I think it preserved a lead for the Giants at the time. And I don't know. And we also had an outfield assist from Michael Conforto. And that was in the first inning. And so just good to see the Giants doing good things defensively. And then at the plate, a couple more home runs. The Giants hit, what did they hit? 4 home runs in this game. Ramos hit 1, Bailey hit 1, Estrada. So 3 home runs, and the Cubs got 2. So there were 5 home runs hit it was one of those nights it turned out at Wrigley Field with the wind blowing out on a warm night. But I mean, how about Heliot Ramos? What else can we possibly say about Heliot Ramos, who is just doing it on a nightly basis, it seems? And this was right after the Giants took a huge gut punch with, this is what I'm saying about the resilience of the Giants right now, because that alone, when they gave up 2 runs in the bottom of the 6th to turn a 1-0 lead into a 2-1 deficit, was a gut punch. And then right away, 2 pitches into the next inning, Heliot Ramos tied it up with an opposite field homer. And so that's resilience. That's bouncing back. I mean, he was fired up. He had 2 more hits in the game. He was 2 for 5, did strike out 2 times, including once with a runner on third and less than 2 outs. So that obviously was an at-bat he'd like to have back, but the home run more than made up for it. And so, yeah, on the season, Heliot Ramos is now hitting a ridiculous 328 with a 404 on base and 577 slugging. I was talking when it was just barely 300, 400, 500 average on base slugging, that was great and amazing and incredible. And now he's, the average is close to 330. The slugging is closer to 600 than it is to 500. He's got 9 homers in 36 games. It's just kind of absurd what he's doing, and he's doing it while playing a good defensive outfield. The numbers: defensive run saved +6, outs above average +2, ultimate zone rating +2.2, runs above average. All of these numbers are given in runs above average. But yeah, 24-year-old Ramos. I noted yesterday how, even though he's been around forever, drafted in 2017, that he's still young. I mean, he's 24 years old. And what then I realized as I was kind of just looking through player pages and whatnot was that Patrick Bailey is 25. Heliot Ramos is younger than Patrick Bailey, which, I mean, I guess maybe it does seem that way, but it's just Bailey was drafted in 2020. Ramos was drafted in 2017, but that's just the difference between getting drafted out of high school and getting drafted out of college. But they're not too far apart in age. So both of them are young players. And, I guess what I'm saying is, it took until now for Bailey to be ready to play at the major league level, now-ish. Last year, obviously, he was great defensively, but didn't really hit well. This year, the bat of Patrick Bailey, I mean, you want to talk about an impact player. I mean, what he does defensively, mostly, the pop times, but mostly the framing. And I don't know if what he did yesterday was framing. It was more just like the umpire forgot to put in his contacts or something like that, because it was the worst strike zone of the year. But Bailey is a great framer, and that's the most important defensive thing that a catcher does by far. And Bailey's very good at that, but he's also hitting. He's hitting 286, a 360 on base, 435 slugging. The expected numbers are significantly better even, which is kind of scary. If he can hit as he's hitting now, he's a star player. And the expected numbers are even better. And so for the 25-year-old Bailey to be doing this, for what we're seeing from Heliot Ramos, complementary players like Thairo Estrada, and what we were seeing from Lamont Wade Jr., who's not too far off from coming back. And then you mix in some veteran guys like Matt Chapman and Jorge Soler, both of whom could figure to improve for sure, but nonetheless have a presence to them that, and in the clubhouse, I think as well, that is big. I don't know. It's just a good mix. It's a good mix of youth, and you've got that on the pitching side too. Like Logan Webb is a young star pitcher, and you've got a guy like Jordan Hicks, who, by the way, was the starter yesterday, and just just 5 more shutout innings for Hicks to lower his season ERA to 2.82. And keep in mind, this is a guaranteed 4-year contract for Hicks, and so that's looking like a great signing. So there's just a certain vibe about this team that I really like, and that I would place like a very for the right odds. I would put a little wager on the Giants like being a World Series team, because before you fall out of your chair, like my belief is that if you make it to the playoffs, you can win the World Series. And we've seen it. We've certainly seen teams like go to the Worlds, like last year's Diamondbacks team, right? They were not the most dominant team in the league by any means at all. They won 84 games. This year's Giants team, you could tell me they're going to win 84 games, and I would be like, yeah, okay, that's totally believable. Hopefully better than that, but it's very possible they win about 84 games. And if you have Webb and you have, all the pitching that they could have at that point, this is a team that could go on a run, and they could go on that run during the season as well to get into the playoffs. So I hope that's the case. I just like the vibe, the resilience. They've kind of taken their lumps, and they've had a ton of injuries, and they've just bounced back like every time, it seems. And so hopefully they can keep it going and actually go on a sustained run and pull away from that 500 mark. That's kind of been the missing ingredient. But yeah, just more heroics there from Ramos, and just more of Bailey establishing himself. A lot of positive things here. And another positive was Camilo Doval bouncing back and having a clean 9th-inning, even though it could have not been clean, but the home plate umpire had his say in this game big time. So we'll get into all of that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can now win 100 times, up to 100 times your money with baseball-only lineups on Prize Picks. If you submit a winning lineup featuring 4 demon squares, you'll cash in big time on the biggest moments of baseball's early to mid-season now. And one of the best things is that Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including, yes, the great state of California. So I've got my Prize Picks entry for tonight right here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. There's like a special or something going on with strikeouts for Logan Webb at only 3.5 strikeouts. And I'm taking more than 3.5 strikeouts for Logan Webb. And then Justin Steele of the Chicago Cubs, I'm taking more than 1.5 walks allowed. He is a strike thrower. I didn't even look up exactly what his walk rate is, but I know that Justin Steele is a very good pitcher. Walk rate is just 6.2%, so that's very good. But the Giants are a team that does draw walks, and so I'm saying that he walks 2 guys or more, and that's a $20 entry for a chance to win $60. So check it out for yourself and download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, as promised, we are going to get into the awful strike zone and Camilo Doval having a big bounce back outing, which also factored into the awful strike zone. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow after the game, we're going to be breaking down tonight's game and tomorrow's game. And so that can always be a little weird. Like sometimes one game is great and the other game is not. Tonight is a great matchup of Logan Webb and Justin Steele. And tomorrow, Kyle Hendricks with 0-4 with an 8.20 ERA against TBD for the Giants. So if you can win today, you've got a shot for a sweep tomorrow with Hendricks on the mound for the Cubs at 11:20 a.m. Pacific time. A reminder that you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. And also a reminder about Postcast with Eric Engel. Right after the game, if you're looking for that instant reaction, Eric provides that on the Locked On Sports San Francisco YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out right now. Open a new tab, Locked On Sports San Francisco on YouTube. Hit the bell notification after almost every Giants game. 49ers game, Warriors game. Eric breaks it down right afterwards, and you can join in the conversation there. And then that shows up on the normal Locked On Giants podcast feed, just not on the YouTube channel because we have our own dedicated separate YouTube channels. But it'll be on this like podcast feed on Apple and Spotify and all that. So anyway, back to getting into the strike zone and Camilo Doval. So I talked yesterday about Doval and was it time to make a change at closer? And I felt like it might be the walks. And I said, what if they go into tomorrow or yesterday's game with a 1-run lead in the bottom of the ninth? Is Doval the guy you want on the mound? And I said, I don't think so. If I had my choice of all the relievers, if they were all rested, I was saying Ryan Walker. If you look at the numbers for Walker, they're just really, really good. And walks have not been an issue. Strikeout rate has been fantastic. He's just been really good, really consistent, and just excellent, basically. But Walker was not available. And Doval, like to my credit in my evaluation here, fell behind 2-0 to the first batter he faced, and the third pitch of the at-bat was like a foot outside. I mean, I don't know exactly how many inches it was outside, but it was not close. It was the worst. In a night of bad calls, it was the worst. I don't know about most impactful necessarily, but the most out of the zone pitch called a strike of the entire night. And it came for the Giants in an enormous spot because 3-0 to the leadoff hitter, that guy's very likely getting on base. But 2-1, it gives you a shot. And Doval came back with a strike on the next pitch, and then I think he threw a ball. But then he did get the hitter out on I think pop up. It was Patrick Wisdom, and then ended up striking out the next hitter and then getting Cody Bellinger to fly out to left to end the game. So huge bounce back for Doval. It did have something to do with the umpire, like who knows. And I'm not going to just say, oh, Patrick Bailey, great framer, because this zone was so bad all night that I just think it, like I said, he's just flipping a coin in his head, like that. I can't believe that pitch was called a strike. And in fact, according to umpire auditor Manny Gonzalez, who was the umpire, missed a season high. Yes, your eyes weren't fooling you. It was the worst performance of the season by any home plate umpire. 27 calls, missed 27 calls, including 13 strikes and 14 balls that were called incorrectly. And if you look at the umpire scorecards thing on Twitter, it's just a crazy graph. Basically, his whole zone needs to be like slanted upwards to the left, like up and to the left, because he was calling that like low and away to righties strikes and up and in on righties balls, even though they were in the zone when they were called balls and they were out of the zone when they were called strikes. So his whole zone is just like slanted diagonally to the lower right from his perspective. But it wasn't consistent. Like you saw, well, there's some level of consistency there, but also there was some, like one at bat with Eric Miller, it was a 4-pitch walk that included 3 pitches that were extremely in the strike zone. So it was just a horrible night. And all in all, it was a zone that favored the Cubs according to this umpire scorecards algorithm, or whatever you want to call it, formula, which is based on like expected runs, not like actual results, which I think is the proper way to look at this, because it's like, well, how did it change what we should have expected the outcome to be? Because sometimes you can get anyway, it's maybe worth looking at both, but it says plus 1.19 runs for the Cubs. And so, I mean, just a horrible zone. I can't wait until we change up the system. At the very least, have the challenge system. So when you have a call, I mean, the Cubs, frankly, would have challenged that 2-0 pitch for sure in the ninth and won that challenge, and it would have changed the game potentially. And so, but in fairness, if I'm the Cubs, I'm furious about that call. That's probably the lead topic for me, is that call there leading off the ninth. So anyway, I can't stand it one way or the other. That's not true. When it happened, I was thrilled. I'm not going to lie and pretend like, oh man, I was upset by that call, but it was such a bad zone. And that's what upsets me, is that we're still dealing with this, and maybe have to wait one more season, 2025, but probably by 2026, we're going to see at least a challenge system. And I think the game will be better off for it. So nice to see Doval bounce back. It looked like he's kind of slowed down his delivery, which has helped him command his stuff a little bit better. But then I worry when runners get on base, he can't slow down his delivery. I feel like maybe this is what's messing him up, is that he's got this issue where he's too slow to deliver the baseball, and he's got to speed up when there's runners on base, and then maybe it throws his mechanics out of whack. And so if there's nobody on, then yeah, you can kind of have a nice, slower, easier delivery. But then if there's guys on base, you can't do that, especially in a one-run game, because they're just going to run wild on you and give Bailey no shot to throw a guy out. And so that's why, like, I would be open-minded to someone like Ryan Walker taken over that role potentially. I'd have to look. These numbers now exist up on Statcast where you can see how good is a pitcher at holding on runners essentially. So that's something I need to dive into and look at. Giants relievers, Doval, Walker, what is league average, all that stuff. It's something I haven't really gotten into. It's one of the kind of newer things they have on Baseball Savant, along with bat tracking data, which is something else we could get into and will eventually on this show. But anyway, huge win. And Logan Webb on the mound tonight, but an ace for the Cubs on the mound as well. So it's a great matchup on paper. And we'll see who comes out on top. And we'll be back tomorrow, everydayers, like I said, with talking about tonight's game and then also tomorrow morning's game as well. So once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked on Giants.